Well, that particular innings from Rajasthan, after they won the toss, decided to bat first, went to all kinds of routes, and finally they found themselves to a score that we will talk about, a very familiar kind of total, just one more than 177. 178 for 6 and 20 overs. Yashasvi Jaiswal was going really well at the top. They looked like sky was the limit at that point in time. So was Devdutt Padikkal. But once both of them were dismissed, wickets just kept falling, especially in the last 7 or 8 overs or so. Joined on Cricbuzz Live halfway through the second match as part of Sunday's doubleheader, joined by Lisa and Shaun Pollock. But first, I'll go to the king, Shaun Pollock. Not one, but two. We didn't acknowledge the earlier power play prediction, and back to back, just to remind us that we hadn't congratulated you. Here's 2 in a row. Spot on, Shaun.
Yeah, thanks, man. I just didn't calculate that one wide. I didn't think they'd go for that extra wide during the match. So that's why, if I had known it, I would have gone 178. But 177 was a pretty good call. But not enough, I don't think.
Yeah, it's a significant one.
Yeah, I mean, 90 after 10, you would think you'd easily double that and go past. And I think they'll be disappointed with their finish. 177 has been defended on this ground, but I think that 11 to 15 was basically where they lost their way. They were at a stage with just the 2 wickets down to really kick on. So 40 for 2. And then you can't really ask too much of the tail enders not tail enders, but guys who bat down the bottom there to get too much more than 10 and over. So they would be disappointed. It has been defended on this ground already this season, so they're not out of it. But I think the cards rest with Lucknow.
We know, Lisa, they were missing a contribution from Jos Buttler at the top. It appeared that they could live without Buttler while just Sanju Samson, Jaiswal, Padikkal were batting. But just to get that big innings, they were all contributing. But Buttler is the kind of guy who would get the 80 of 50.
Yeah, and that's the difference between Rajasthan scoring close to 200 and 178. You needed someone within that top 4 to go big. And when you're coming up to the back end of the league stages and then going into finals, you need a big score like that. So yes, they'd be happy that they've been able to have some contributions from everyone. But boy, they'll be kicking themselves that they got themselves set. They got used to the conditions. We know Brabourne Stadium and the pitch is really fruitful from a batting perspective. So they just weren't able to cash in.
But the 2 people who actually did the job for them, the fact that they even got 178 and not 158, Yashasvi Jaiswal, Devdutt Padikkal, we briefly alluded to it at the halfway stage, back where they belong, Shaun Pollock. Yashasvi Jaiswal at the top. DDP, yes, he belonged at the top when he was with a different franchise. But here, probably this seems to be the right place for him because you don't want Samson to bat any lower.
Yeah, I like the look of that top 4. I think just the issue for them probably at this stage was the Jaiswal and Padikkal, maybe a touch inexperienced, maybe not quite comprehending and understanding the value of someone going to the 18th, 19th over and the difference that makes or contribution that makes to the total on the board. So they'll learn from that. But I do like the look of the top 4 now. I think that's what they settled. If they do go through, no changing. Leave it alone.
But would it also be a case, I know Hetma is missing in the lineup, but would it also be a case of that top 4 needing to realize that they don't really have that big kick coming after that, Neesham having not played enough games?
Well, at some point, you've got to rely on those people that are coming in and taking that role. It's T20 cricket, and the formula is roughly the same around the world, that your 5, 6, 7 are your finishers, are the ones that can that can strike the ball so cleanly that it clears the boundary. So, coaching staff, list managers, players know when they're in that role, that's their job. So, yes, you don't have Hetmeyer, who's used to the conditions here in India, but Jimmy Neesham's been training. I know it's a different level of intensity, but you've got to trust that.
But just let me follow that up to you, Lisa. What do you think is the reason someone like Jimmy Neesham has not got as much game time as we may have expected?
Well, actually, we were just talking in the offices here, and there seems to be a belief here in India that Jimmy Neesham's technique is very leg side dominant. It doesn't access the offside, and maybe it's because he doesn't get the good pace and bounce that he's probably used to in New Zealand and conditions like South Africa or Australia. So he's a little bit more limited. So maybe that's why he doesn't get the opportunities, yet they still keep selecting him. So I kind of scratched my head. Yes, he does well at international level, so just hasn't been really given an opportunity. So maybe there's a little bit of a stigma around how he plays the game here in India, and he's just going to have to prove himself maybe in New Zealand colours before he gets a regular gig.
But Shaun, if you really had to assess the 20 overs and look at the reason for them falling short by 10, 15 runs maybe, how much would you put it down to the inexperience of maybe those two guys who should have kicked on, and how much credit do you give to the bowling side?
I think you got to give a lot of credit to the bowling side. I think you got to give a lot of credit to Rahul. His decision to get old Badoni on worked an absolute charm. We talked at the halfway stage how they didn't want to go Pandya because he spins it into the two left-handers who were at the crease. They didn't want to go Bishnul because he tends to go across the left-handers, offer up too much width, and it's actually quite easy to hit for talented Indian left-handers under those conditions. So he went to Badoni, and it worked an absolute trick. The off-spinner picks up his one wicket, and then the whole thing sort of unraveled. So, yeah, a lot of good effort from the bowlers as well. Oshin Khan and Avish Khan, pretty good. I think they'll be disappointed a little bit about the cameo that Bolt managed to achieve. I mean, that's an all-time best for him, 17 off 9. It's given them something maybe more than they could have had to defend. So, but look at the bowling options. You talk about having 5 guys doing the job. Sometimes you're too much spoiled for choice. But I think that in many ways you should try and really rely on 6 and not really be casting the net much further than that, because then it comes to a stage where people sort of don't take enough responsibility. Holt has only bowled his 2 for 12. I mean, should he not have bowled another one? And only 2 of them basically finished their 4 over spell. So I don't think that's ideal.
Yeah, I was just going to say that you want an extra over, an extra couple of overs, but 8 bowling options. I mean, you might as well have tried Deepak Huda, just left the 2 wicket keepers and Quinton de Kock himself out. Deepak Huda bowls, so why not?
Yeah, it's a little bit of like a participation medal. Here you get your over, now you move along from mid-on to the bowler, and then everyone goes around the circle. And sometimes as a captain as well, you want to give everyone an opportunity. Maybe that's what they're doing as well, given that they've got kind of 1 foot already into the finals. They wanted to see certain bowlers bowl in certain situations so that they have a better understanding. Can they bowl in that phase once again? But I still think, it's really important to get things right at the back end. It's not a time for tinkering. It's not a time for being cute or tricky. Just get the job done and win the game.
You did mention, I mean, this in the same breath, Shaun Pollock, while you said that Holder should have maybe finished his spell, but the Badoni move was a brilliant move. KL Rahul, historically, at least in this tournament, there's not much history to go by, new franchise, never more than 6. They've never even gone to a 7th bowler. Today they went to 8. Was it just about trying to grab a situation?
Yeah, I think the Badoni over was supposed to be the solution to the Pandya and Bishnoi problem, because it didn't look like they were both going to finish or get 4 overs out of them at one stage. And that's why I had no issue with that. The Stoinis, we haven't really seen much from him. I mean, what sort of part would he have played? He goes for 15. That's the most expensive of anyone who's gone to the crease there today. So, yeah, the the Badoni one I had no issue with. But I just think when Holder only goes 2 overs, 1 for 12, you got to at least get him a 3rd over at some stage because he's been effective.
But in terms of the total, I know Shaun has given his views on that. He might have predicted it, but he was candid enough to admit, yes, my score, not enough runs on the board. Lisa, you concur?
Yeah, I do actually. I think it's a decent pitch, good carry, good pace. I mean, the last game that was played there, I think Punjab scored at 209. So shows you the difference there. So they're going to have to bowl extremely well and pick up wickets in the first power play if they're really going to put some pressure on Lucknow. But yeah, I certainly think they're probably about 15 to 20 runs short.
Well, we did show you that they have bowling options, but for Lucknow's batting, yes, they bowl deep. We know that 9 bowling options, but they also do bat deep. They've been using Jason Holder fairly deep in the piece. So you've got Rahul, de Kock, Huda, Stoinis, Pandya, then Badoni. I think that someone like Badoni to rediscover the form from games 1, 2, and 3 is what would be critical for them, Shaun.
It is going forward too. The way he's played, that's why in the last game we're thinking, gee, shouldn't Holder have got in a little bit earlier? So maybe the wicket that he picked up will give him that little boost of confidence. But they do, if they're going to get into the knockout stages, need to find some more runs from those middle two.
Happy with Jason Holder down the order, Lisa?
Well, I think he might be a little bit flexible, but I feel like this is the first time we've seen probably Stoinis in that number 4 position. It's not normally been Pandya, Badoni, and then a Stoinis. So I like the idea, given probably the last few games they've both Badoni and Pandya were eating up a lot of delivery. So I like him up at 4. And then depending on the situation, maybe Holder comes in and breaks up those two, Badoni and Pandya. So they've got some flexibility. That's what they've shown us throughout this IPL. They've batted all those guys in the middle order in all different positions. But I think they're still trying to figure out what's their best batting order.
Well, unlike certain other franchises, the one place they don't tinker at all, they don't need to tinker, is the 2 men who walk out at the very front. KL Rahul, he's been having a bit of a strange tournament. Couple of first ball ducks. When he gets going, he can get to 100, which is why the role at the man at the other end, the South African connection, Shaun, is so important. Quinton de Kock had to stand at the non-strikers end wondering what is coming from my skipper today.
Yeah, I just think Quinton in particular, I know his game pretty well, having watched him over the years here in South Africa. And I feel like it's almost like he's trying to go too hard at the ball. What he was so good at in the years gone by is the little flick, a little bit using the pace behind square. But everything about him this season seems like he wants to be out in front of himself, trying to hit it in front of mid-wicket or back over the bowler's head. I just think he needs to maybe just get that soft touch a little bit, get a little bit inventive with some of the shots that we know he can play. And that'll lead to a little bit more consistency. He does get them off to a flyer and takes a lot of pressure off KL Rahul when he gets going. I think as a partnership, they're better than that. They can use a little bit more finesse.
You probably want them to feed off each other, Lisa, a little bit, because if Rahul sort of eases into an innings, maybe 9 of 9 balls, rather than a flamboyant duck, or just going so hard that Quinton really needs to take the back seat. So they probably want to feed off each other like the Warner-Bairstow partnership, maybe.
Yeah, and we've seen kind of the formula within a power play, haven't we, as well? Like if there aren't loose balls to hit in the first over or 2, that's okay. Just get used to the pace of the pitch, the bounce, the carry, and then maybe you can cash in, over 4 and 5 and 6. And that's where the bulk of the big scoring comes within the power play. So you don't have to necessarily go hard from ball 1. I agree with Polly. I think, whether it's almost almost an ego, or you wanted to kind of stamp your authority by being able to bludgeon the bowlers in front of the wicket, you can score your runs a different way.
All right, just to wrap things up, we've talked about the total. Obviously, one of the 2 teams will have to outdo that logic. But Shaun, in the first innings, we saw spin performing better than pace, purely in terms of economy. With this Rajasthan bowling lineup, if they are to dent Lucknow in this run chase, do you see the role of Ashwin and Chahal more vital than a bolt up top with Prasidh Krishna and Obaid McCoy as the X factor?
Yeah, they've got nice 5 bowlers there. I don't think they have to worry. Jimmy Neesham will probably play a little bit of a part. I just say, if you look at the first innings, spin, I think it's still got its challenges. I think when they're bowling to certain personnel, they were basically hit out of the attack, and that's why they had to go to Badoni. So it'd be interesting to see when those spinners come on, who's at the crease. There's no doubting about the class of their ability. And if they come up against some of the weaker batters in that lineup, but if you get Quinton de Kock and KL Rahul on track, and after 6 overs they've got to 50, those spinners will have to watch out about what's going to happen.
I reckon an over of maybe Riyan Parag, a little bit like Badoni, might be required if a partnership gets settled.
Yeah, well, it just looks as if we feel, and Lisa, I'll come to you first on this, Lucknow should chase this down.
Yes.
Shaun, Lucknow should chase this down.
Yeah, I would think they should chase this down. A little bit concerned if they can leave it to the middle order, but I think they should chase it down.
Yeah, well, of course, if that does happen, let's take one last look at the points table before we wrap up here, because it will mean that if Lucknow were to get to 18 points, they'll have a Q next to their name. It'll be 1 plus plays 2, which is Gujarat plays Lucknow, and then so many other teams will be fighting, whether it's the 14, whether it's one going to 16 and a few other permutations, combinations. There will be less parts of the pie to play for. It'll be fun and games. We'll wait for the result, but we'll also come somewhere in between in the 10th over and assess it on Cricbuzz Combox. For now, from Lisa, Shaun, and myself, that's all we have on Cricbuzz Live.